Hello, and a very warm welcome to this morning's webinar, Exploring Participatory Evaluation. My name is Celeste Berteau, and I'm an Evidence and Influencing Coordinator for the Young People with Care Experience program at the Life Changes Trust, and I'm going to be your chair for today. Now, the purpose of this morning's webinar is to explore the benefits that participatory evaluation can bring, involving peer researchers, that is, people with lived experience in the topic or area being researched or evaluated, can be challenging, but we feel is ultimately both valuable and rewarding. Back in 2019, the Trust launched a participatory evaluation project. The exploration of how this worked and some key findings on the project are captured in the Life as We Know It report, which was produced by Media Education and Briege Nugent. We'll hear more about that later, but before we begin, I have a few very quick housekeeping points to cover. This event is about an hour long and is being recorded. It will be on the Life Changes Trust website in a few days, so you can share it with anyone who missed it or anyone you think would be interested in learning more about participatory evaluation. We will email everyone when this is available. Later in the webinar, we'll be having a Q&A panel session. If you would like to ask a question of the panel, you can put your questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. There's also a chat section. Please use this if you have any general comments. You will see in the chat function that there is a drop-down menu. This gives you the option to share your comments with the panel only or with everyone. It's always nice to share, so please remember to select with everyone for that option. Now, getting back to this morning's webinar, I'd just like to give you a bit of background on our journey to producing Life as We Know It. The original intention for our participatory evaluation project, which began in December of 2019, was to support young people with care experience to take part in the evaluation of projects funded by the Trust. Over the last few years, the Trust has commissioned a range of independent evaluations of our funding initiatives on the Young People with Care Experience program. We were really keen that young people themselves could be a part of this evaluative process. For example, defining research questions, developing creative engagement, conducting interviews, and doing some of the analysis. In late 2019, a group of peer researchers were recruited with the aim of supporting and informing the Trust's evaluation of our Champions Board initiative, which was being carried out by Research Scotland, and our evaluation of relationship-based practice, which was being carried out by the Alliance Between. Of course, in December 2019, we had no idea what was coming, but by March, we saw a nationwide lockdown in the UK. Due to the impact of the pandemic, both the offer of involvement from the commissioned evaluations and the ability of the peer researchers to participate had changed, and this project shifted significantly. Young people from the project were able to take part in some aspects of the evaluation work of trust-funded projects, but this involvement was more limited than originally envisaged. The Trust, Media Education, and Briege, therefore, agreed to be as flexible and inclusive as possible, and we shifted the project to also include supporting all of the peer researchers through in-house arts-based opportunities to reflect on their own journeys through care and their experiences as peer researchers. For most of the peer researchers, their main motivations for joining the project were to help create positive changes to the care system, to meet others with similar lived experiences, and to share their stories. These reflections weren't always aligned with the work supporting the commissioned evaluations, so we decided to showcase those creative works separately in an online gallery. The link to the gallery is going to be shared with you in the chat, and I would strongly encourage you to go have a look when you have time. Thank you, Mari, for sharing that link. From their experience of supporting the peer researchers, Media Education and Briege Nugent produced a report, Life as We Know It. The report is primarily a reflection on what it means to carry out participatory evaluation and how all parties involved can benefit from the process. So that's a little bit of background on how we got to where we are today. Later, we'll be exploring the outcomes and key learnings from the project, and Briege will talk us through this in more detail. But generally, there were 3 key findings that I just want to mention briefly. The first is to highlight the value added through this process. For funders like ourselves, it increased the likelihood of getting in-depth, meaningful insights and learning from our evaluation projects. For the research organizations, they found that the involvement of peer researchers can lead to the creation of thoughtful research tools, can enhance engagement, and can increase levels of reflection and honesty. For the peer researchers, when properly supported, it can be an opportunity not only to learn new skills and increase confidence, but also to create a new identity as a researcher. The second key finding is the importance of working in a way that supports an ethics of care. Briege will give you more details on this later, but essentially it comes down to thinking carefully about what being supportive and inclusive actually looks like. One of the main takeaways from this project has been the recognition that doing peer research is not one size fits all. Particularly in academia, peer research can have a specific meaning that involves the peer researchers co-designing every aspect of the research, from the first research question all the way through to the final write-up. We found that in order to be truly inclusive, we needed to meet people where they were, which did not always mean being involved in every aspect of the research. While we should always aspire to have a co-design approach, being realistic and supportive and offering opportunities that make sense for both the research project and the peer researchers is vital. And finally, as we found throughout so many of our projects and initiatives at the Life Changes Trust, the role the arts can play in this process is hugely beneficial. Throughout this project, we have found that the use of creative approaches like visual arts, music, creative writing, and filmmaking has helped support broad and inclusive engagement of people with lived experience. So that's some of the key findings from the Life as We Know It project. And as I said, we'll hear more about that later from Briege. And there is lots more coming up too. Next, we're going to hear about the impact working with peer researchers had on one of the research organizations. After that, we'll see a conversation about how being involved impacted one of the peer researchers. And then Briege will talk a bit more about doing peer research. We'll end with our panel discussion and a Q&A session. So that is more than enough for me for now. It's high time we heard from the evaluators and the peer researchers to find out what the experience of participatory evaluation was like for them. We're going to start by looking at what impact participatory evaluation involving people with lived experience had on trust-appointed evaluators. Liam Doherty, one of the peer researchers, spoke with Nadia Hyder from Research Scotland, who carried out the evaluation of our Champions Board initiative. Here's what they had to say.
Hello, Nadia. I've got some questions to ask you. So, number one, how did you feel about having ex-care peer researchers contribute to the interview with you?
Hi, Liam. Well, thanks so much. I think that's a great question, and I felt great about it. First of all, for me, it was really lovely to get to work in a pair or in a small group with other people rather than doing all the work on my own. And I really enjoyed getting to know all the peer researchers and to see you guys get more and more confident in your interview skills. I mean, by the end of the fieldwork period, there were some interviews where I just sat back and I took notes, and it was the peer researchers who were leading it and doing the entire interview themselves. So it's been really lovely to see all that progress.
Cool. Thank you very much. What does having someone with experience of care involved as a peer researcher add to the research? Were you surprised at the benefits?
So, I mean, the peer researchers just bring so much personality to the work. They really make it more fun, certainly for me. And I think that having a peer researcher involved in the interview helped the people that we were interviewing to understand that this was a really collaborative effort. So when we're doing research that's looking at outcomes for people who have care experience, we can involve those people at every stage of the work. And their presence also helped to bring some of that discussion to life. So when we were doing the interviews, it wasn't just a theoretical discussion about some imaginary people or people that we didn't know. It was about real people with real lives who were right there with us in the interview. I suppose I wasn't too surprised at the benefits, and we included the peer researchers in the method because we hoped that it would do all of this and that it would enhance the work, and it really did. But initially, I was actually a bit surprised at how open and comfortable the people that we were interviewing were. Most of them were quite senior level professionals, and I wasn't sure kind of how openly they would speak with a young person present in the meeting. But actually, in practice, that wasn't a problem. I felt, and I hope that you and the other peer researchers felt, that the people we interviewed were really forthcoming and honest, as much as they would have been in any other situation, and maybe even a bit more honest with the peer researchers present.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think they were really quite honest and really enjoyed it. Number 3, when working with the peer researchers, did you learn or pick up anything you would use in your own future interviewing technique?
Yes, absolutely. I think having peer researchers involved helped me to be a little bit more relaxed in these types of interviews. So although the subject matter is quite an important one and actually quite serious, the tone of the interview doesn't need to be. It can be quite relaxed and light, and it can be quite fun as well. And I've learned a lot about working with peer researchers in that online space and how to navigate all of that, make sure that everyone's really comfortable and that everyone can be really engaged in the interview too. So there's a lot of learning for me.
Cool. That's good. Number 4, with the peer researchers having been through the care system itself, do you think that helped the Champions Board partners feel even more motivated to be heard and let us know what has improved?
Yes, I think so. I can't speak for the partners themselves, but they were definitely really open and really honest in those discussions. And so many of them were keen to involve peer researchers, that they wanted a peer researcher to sit in on the interview that they were doing. And I think that during those discussions, they interacted well. They were talking to me, but even if the peer researcher was observing and not asking any questions, the partners still interacted really well with them. And there was this real keenness to engage with them and to share everything that they had found in their own areas. So yeah, I do think that they were really motivated to let us know what had been improved.
Yeah, that's good. And number 5, do you think in the future you would like people with experience of care to participate as peer researchers in relevant projects?
Yes, yeah, of course, definitely. I think that they bring so much to the evaluation, and not just in the interviews, but actually in the really early stages when we're refining the method and the interview questions. The insight from people with experience is completely invaluable at that stage. And then again, towards the end of the work, which we're at just now, we're finalizing the report and we're thinking about how to share those findings. There's a really important role for peer researchers there to guide us on what they want to know, what are the most important findings they're interested in, and how we should communicate that information back to them. So yeah, definitely, I'd be very happy to work with people with care experience again.
That's good. I'd be very happy to work with your good self again. Thank you.
Thanks, Liam.
Many thanks to Liam and Nadia for sharing that conversation with us. I think it's so interesting having this theme of fun pop up over and over again. As someone who was trained in social research, this was not something that was emphasized in my degree. So it's definitely prompted me to reflect on some of my own practice as well. We'll be seeing Liam again later in our Q&A session. So don't forget to put any questions you may have in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. You don't have to wait until the end to put questions in. You can just kind of pop them in as they come into your mind. So we've heard now about how having peer researchers involved in evaluation felt for the evaluators themselves. But let's turn things around and hear things from the perspective of the peer researchers. This time, Ian Shaw from Media Education spoke with Liam about what the experience was like for peer researchers and for him. Over to Liam and Ian.
I'm Ian Shaw from Media Education, and we've had the pleasure of working with Life Changes Trust on this project. And I'm interviewing Liam today. And Liam, just what's it been like to be involved with this project?
I'd say it's been a really intriguing experience. Like, it's given me a chance to have a look at the care system from afar, if you know what I mean. Because obviously having experienced the care system, this gives me a chance to see what it might have been like for other people who might have not had such a positive experience in it. I suppose I feel like I have responsibility, not just for me. I believe this project is for people in care 10, 20 years ago who might have not had the opportunity to do what I've done and and to talk about the negatives and the positives of the care. So I'm thinking that I've basically took it on my shoulders that this is for everybody in care, not just for me, but for everybody who's experienced it.
I mean, that's a really brilliant motivation. You know, it's not just for yourself, it's for everybody. It's thinking about making improvement for everyone. And I think that's exactly right. I mean, it was one of the things that we were very interested in was how people could apply their lived experience rather than just share it. And that's been one of the main things from this project is how we're using arts approaches and creativity to do that. In terms of, I mean, what was it like engaging with the research companies that you were involved with? Because that was obviously a key part of it, was your own journey, but it was also working with the research organizations.
I personally really enjoyed it because, like, I think what's important to me is like the kids in care at the moment, and kids to come in care. I think it's important to see change happening for them, for they are the guys in it at the moment. And having myself been in care, whenever someone knew I was in care, people often thought I was a rotten egg or I must have been hard work for my parents. And personally, also I knew that wasn't the case, and that hurts, if you know what I mean, because for people to judge you like that and think, oh, you must have been the wrong one, it's not very nice. Linking up with the project, the different groups, I really enjoyed it because I personally feel this is like for me, it was like a movie experience in terms of the whole thing. I lived the live movie by being in foster care. I've also watched the movie from my own eye, from my own vision, and I've also reviewed it, which I've done with you guys, and I've had reviews from my foster family, and they've shown me the excuse the pun, they showed me the popcorn moments, and they've also showed me the moments that need to be improved on. But I think for me, what's important is the champions. See, the champions board. To me, they're the directors. Like, it's okay for me and the RP researchers to be the folks saying, "Oh, this is what we'd like to get done," or "This is what we'd like to be done." But the thing is, it's really out of our hands. You know what I mean? It is the champions board who, at the end of the day, they're the directors. It's up to them to make the sequel of the movie coming up a better one than it was. So I do believe that our peer researchers, I think we spoke about in the past, how sometimes professionals have been good at making it look like they will listen to us, but really, has anything been done? And for myself, being an analyst, I'll all be looking in the future to see have I seen improvement, and if I have, then I will feel like it's being made a difference, and if not, then it's kind of just back to square one.
That's really interesting because it's like the whole process has made you more aware, and in a way, not that the word isn't critical, but it's about being aware and knowing what it is that you expect from this, and having expectations.
Yes. Yeah, no, definitely. Like, because I believe in, I don't believe in standing still. I believe everything can be improved in life. Like, these kids have gone into care. They've gone into care for the reason is that sadly they've maybe not had the love they're meant to get when they were at home. So, for professionals to really put their neck out in the line and really work hard, then that's a credit to them. And if you're just in it for wage, then really I think you're in the wrong role. And you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, that point's really well made. And just looking at it, I can see, I was thinking about you when I first met you and when you came for interview for the peer researcher role, and just how much you've changed and grown in your confidence, and from being somebody who might have been thinking that, you know, this is, I don't really understand where I fit into this, which is totally understandable, but and then that not being quite sure to now being very definite and very positive about what your position is. And I've seen that change in you. I wondered about what you thought about the approach, not just working with us at Media Education, but also working with the research companies, and how did the work that you did with us help prepare you for that?
I personally, it really did help me because I am someone who I do always like to try to be nice and really quite charming, but it is quite hard. You know what I mean? Like, it's like social situations are difficult, if you know what I mean. And you guys proper prepared me, if you know what I mean. Like, you was always supportive, and it actually made the experience a lot easier being with Nadia, if you know what I mean, because like it's almost like you guys have trained me up, you know what I mean, and that helped me with Nadia, because I remember something that is like one day Nadia had asked us if an up-year researcher could join the chat we were having with one of the Champions Club members, and in the past, adding the yes man, just going aye, sure. But for me at that moment, it wasn't right, and I said no, and Nadia praised me for that, because you know what I mean. Cause it's kind of like, you know what I mean. It was something I've never done before, but like actually saying no, if you know what I mean. It sounds weird, but so I'd say the preparation I got really, like, I mean, it literally helped me so much. You know what I mean?
I think that confidence to say no or to set boundaries is really, really important. And I think that there's that sense of ownership and control that comes out of that, of reestablishing yourself and your own boundaries within that, rather than being that need to please in order to belong kind of thing that sometimes happens. Totally. And then in terms of the way that you were using the exploration, using an arts-based approach to find out what you wanted to say and to see the agenda that you wanted to set, how did that work in with the work with the research organizations?
Well, I think it gave me, like, because I'm always want to like, I take everything I'm given as a task. I'm always want to make it my own, if you know what I mean. Like, and like me personally, when it comes to the arts, I'm one who works with like analysing. I work with metaphors, and I take something maybe which might be quite obscure to folk, but the way I tell a story, I try and pull people in. I try and make people think differently about it, and I think that gives me joy. You know what I mean? Because if I'm able to make someone think differently about something, then I feel like I've done a good job. If you know what I mean? Because, for example, one of the Champions Board members, he asked me to look over questions that they were going to be asking for young folk, and when I was reading the questions out, they were too long, if you know what I mean. Like, I had to actually try, and I felt like I was a machine. I felt like I was a computer trying to process everything. And I said to him, it's hard to process, if you know what I mean. I think sometimes you just need to make the questions what you want it to be. Don't try and get smart. Just leave it. And so I guess I basically just tried to make things my own way, if you know what I mean. The way it makes me happy, if you know what I mean.
Totally. And I think that that's one of the things that I've really enjoyed out of this, is seeing that growth and confidence, and for you to set your own agenda and to then be somebody that's almost, it's that you're then applying your lived experience through the process, rather than basically telling your story. And I think that's been one of the joys for me out of this process.
Yeah, I really did feel like Champions Board really took my ideas and took my thoughts really well, and I'm really glad about that.
I think that you made a real difference as well. I thought that they were very responsive generally to your input and the other peer researchers' inputs. So I want to congratulate you, Liam. I think it's been a really powerful and wonderful experience for us too, and we've learned massively, and it's been a privilege to be working with you, a privilege.
Thanks to Ian and to you, Liam, again. I don't know about the rest of you, but I was so struck by the comments about ownership and control and being able to set your own boundaries, being a part of something that can help you flip that narrative and let you see yourself as having a role in a bigger context. The whole movie, as Liam said, is just so powerful. So thank you again for sharing your insights with us. So we've now heard from peer researchers and also evaluators. So next we're going to look in a little bit more detail at the key learning from this project. I'm going to ask Briege Nugent to join me on the screen now. Hi, Briege. So Briege is an independent consultant who has plenty of experience working with participatory evaluation, and who's been instrumental in producing Life as We Know It. Briege is going to look in more depth at the benefits of peer research and kind of what those key messages are for others who are thinking about their own participatory evaluation projects. So over to you, Briege.
Thank you so much, Celeste, and thank you, Life Changes Trust, for inviting us to do this today. It's a real privilege. So that's a bit about me and my involvement. I'm now going to talk a bit about the Life as You Know project, and firstly, I'll talk about the key findings. So I think probably one of the top key findings is that actually supporting the involvement of people's lived experience needs to be done ethically, and with an emphasis on inclusion. And Celeste highlighted about ethics of care, and that's really just about being sensitive. It's about thinking about people's needs in advance, and it's about promoting enablers to engagement. So even right from the very start, media education talked through about how they would help support people into recruitment, because it's actually quite difficult to get people recruited onto the project. So it was about thinking through the practicalities of getting people to interviews, which back then they were physical interviews, travel expenses. Do they want to have somebody along with them? Do they want to have somebody sitting in with them that they know even during the interview? Just all those wee small steps that actually make things actually physically possible for people to take that step forward to get involved. We also found that actually doing the recruitment through trusted networks was really beneficial, and actually keeping that conversation going with trusted networks throughout the project was really beneficial too, particularly because we were going through a pandemic throughout all of this. The involvement of people with lived experience in evaluation remains rare, and this project, I think, highlights that should not be the case, but also just what Celeste had said from the very outset, that there's this very academic sense of what peer research is, and it's that they're involved right from the very start, right the way through. But actually, what we found is not only is that not realistic for some people, but actually they don't want to be involved in every aspect of the project. So for example, lo and behold, I found that not everybody on the team wanted to help me do any coding of the interviews, which guess what? That's actually not the most exciting task as a researcher. So, it's just these type of things that actually made us realize that the all or nothing approach that, if you want, academia has towards peer research isn't actually that realistic if you really want to be inclusive. Involving people with lived experience is not just an ethical or nice thing to do, but has real benefits, and I'll talk to those now in a wee minute. And the last point, which also Celeste emphasised, and I'm sure media education would shout from the rooftops, is that the arts offers a fun and creative way for people to articulate their stories and have a platform to be heard. And that's not a new finding, but I think for evaluations and for participatory evaluations and peer research, arts is probably an underused asset, and actually definitely should be something people consider in the future. So those are some of our key findings. I'll now talk a little bit about the benefits of peer research and participatory evaluation. So one of the top things, I suppose, if you are taking an ethical stance as this, is having voices of people with lived experience involved throughout the processes means that you're flattening the power disparities between those doing research and those being researched. And you'll have seen from, Liam and the way he was talking just about, thinking through the questions and how you put questions to people and how you formulate questions, not to be too clever about things, not to be trying to make it too difficult. And I think having that insider view helps you as a researcher really take on board the participants and think about their needs, so it can lead to more thoughtful research tools. And Liam's super smart, and the other peer researchers involved are super smart. Like, questions he set for Nadia today are his questions. He made those questions up. And actually, if you go on to the gallery that's been set up, which I definitely encourage you to do, you'll see there's a piece of work there called Home, which Liam actually interviewed his foster carers and his foster brother. And the questions he asked, the way he put them, I, as a researcher, I'm learning from him. So I think I'm not just saying that, like, there is a real thoughtfulness that goes into the way in which the peer researchers were taking their role. And so it means that actually when you create the interview schedules and the topic guides, they're more engaging. And that should mean then that there are more high quality interviews and data and learning. And I know the chat that I had with Celeste, she said that the lines between and Research Scotland talked about that actually they were getting more younger people wanting to be involved in the process. And maybe that's because they are actually getting that, these research tools and they've been so well considered and their needs have been first and foremost throughout the process. Okay, it also makes it more likely that the barriers to engagement are identified and overcome. So, thinking through, again, the practicalities, thinking through, for example, if young people want to be involved in digital interviews, training them beforehand, giving that encouragement, making sure that, they know what they're doing and they're not feeling uncomfortable at any point. It increases the level of insight and meaningfulness of analysis. So even though peer researchers, not all of them want to be involved in the coding, when we brought them all together to talk through the findings and the key themes, they really, really were really invested in this. And they were saying, well, actually, what do we really want to take from this? So, for example, one of the things was they were saying, there's a law now. Well, we were saying there's a law now about sibling contact. And they were saying, well, yeah, that's the law. But actually, what are the methods to make sure that that's actually going to happen? And so it means that the analysis has this insider view that actually is invaluable, and it makes it real life, so that the recommendations that you then put forward are grounded in actually what's happening in real life. The peer researchers also, I think Ian talked about this to Liam, about the growth and confidence. And what we saw throughout this process, and was actually a really beautiful thing to see, is them moving from, just talking about their experiences to actually, right, what do we want to do in order to affect change? How do we want our voices to be heard? And they become advocates in their own right, which is a really powerful and amazing thing to see. So you see that there are some really important and tangible benefits to participatory evaluation approach. So next, I'm going to talk about some recommendations on how to get the best outcomes from taking this approach. So what are the recommendations? Well, it's about adopting an ethics of care, which is our sort of fancy way of saying it's Gilligan. It comes from like feminist kind of research ethics. It's this idea actually that what you try to do is be sensitive to the needs of those who are involved. You prioritize them and just being caring, just being thoughtful, just thinking through all the other things that exist in their life. And you're not there to fix that, but you are there to help maybe make those steps to engagement possible. And if you don't consider those, then they actually act as barriers. It's about being inclusive. And Celeste said at the very start of this, it's about meeting peer researchers where they are. And I think that's really key to this. It's not about where you want them to be. It's about where they are. It's not about what you want them to do. It's about what they want to do. And so therefore, you need to be flexible in your approach, as opposed to this all or nothing. And as I say, I know the coding was one thing, but like just things come up in people's lives that, maybe they weren't able to do certain aspects of the project. And, there were two peer researchers, for example, that had real life struggles happening. And so we weren't able to say that they had to commit this amount of time to doing these things at this time. But we said, well, why don't you use your time to tell your story in a different way? So using music, creative writing, so they could use it in their own time. So it's about being flexible. It's about being creative, and it's about being inclusive. This word fun keeps coming up, and it sounds really not fun when you say it like that, but actually one of the things we recognize, and I think Liam definitely, I'm sure, will want to mention this at some point, but it's just recognize actually the people who you're talking to are young people, and even adults. We all want to have fun. So it was even small things like there was a group activity, for example, one of the organizations was organizing, and they let us see what the running order of things were for the day. And Liam immediately was like, you know, you can't just go straight into the work. You should have an icebreaker. You should have a way of settling people in. And with that on board, it's also about ensuring there's sufficient time for peer researchers to settle, discover their role, and make connections. Not everybody knows what research is, for example. So it's just making sure the training is there, that people know what their role is about, what the expectations are. And I mentioned before about the wider context. What are the safeguards that you have in place? Recognize that some of the interviews might be triggering for people. What are the trauma awareness training that you have? And we all did the NHS free training online. And I would definitely recommend that. And it's just about basically making you more aware about the things that you could be doing to make the whole experience more comfortable for everybody. It's about being realistic also about your role as professionals. So as I said before, you're not there to fix everything. You're there to ensure that if they do need help, they're signposted on. You're working alongside their trusted networks to ensure that there's clear communication throughout, and being clear about boundaries. So in almost all of the cases for the 4 peer researchers we worked with, this was their first time working in a professional capacity. So we needed to make sure that that was how they knew that that was the interactions they were having. But it is about, if things are coming up, to be responsive. And that's about playing a supportive role in their lives, but appropriately so. And the last thing I would say in terms of the recommendations is that the creative approaches really ensure that broad and inclusive engagement. So I mentioned briefly about creative writing, about the use of music. Liam really enjoyed metaphors, photography. So it's about helping people find their interest, and making it fun, and using that interest basically to tell their story if they want to tell their story, or to input as they want to input. Okay, so that's some of our recommendations. We also thought it might be useful to produce some handy top tips, which we have developed to make peer research and participatory evaluation possible. So, and there's no real order to this, it's just how I was able to shift them onto the slides. So budgeting is the first thing I would say, though. Budgeting appropriately for the level and types of engagement that you're able to have. So as I said before, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. So even if you want peer researchers to comment on the topic guides, that's a small part, but it can be really key. It's about giving peer researchers a monthly wage if you're going to have them involved in the whole project, so they have clear expectations of their time. If it's going to be a small chunk of time, be clear about that and pay them appropriately, at least living wage. Relationships, be prepared to really listen to what the peer researchers have to say and take their advice on board. And Liam talked about that, about the champions board, really listening. Strive to achieve the upper rungs on the participation ladder. And HEART has this 8-step ladder. At the very top, the peer researchers are owning, delivering, doing everything. The worst thing you can do is being tokenistic. So if you don't have the real capacity to do this in a meaningful way, don't do it at all. In that, if you're not going to listen, don't do it at all. But I would say if you can include and do it, but do it with the right intentions. Don't just say this to tick a box. It's about being flexible, presenting different stage involvement as choices, not all or nothing, recognizing the benefits of bringing people together that have shared experience. Unfortunately, with this project, because the restrictions, we weren't able to do that much. But when we did, it was magic, actually. And I think they all really loved it. Be empathetic, responsive to change, and prioritize inclusivity, and also end in contact sensitively. We do these projects, and actually end in contact can sometimes be the thing that people forget. But if you've been having that intense working relationship with somebody for quite a while, it's important that you end that engagement incrementally. And also, ideally, if there's any opportunities coming up or things in the up ahead, that you bring those people back on board when you can, and again, appropriately and responsibly. Some of our top tips are also outlining the importance of the scaffolding or enabling factors that make peer research and participatory evaluation possible. And I've used those words because they're in the promise. I think they're really important for us to take forward. Recruit through trusted networks, which I've mentioned before. Be realistic and clear about the level of involvement and responsibilities of peer researchers. Follow through always on what you said you're going to do. Address potential barriers. So, for example, as soon as the pandemic hit, Media Education sourced all of the laptops. They trained people in doing Zoom and and getting selfie sticks so that they could even do filming on their own, things like that. So be responsive and understand what the barriers are. And that's also by having a good relationship. So people are revealing that throughout. Refer to and treat peer researchers as colleagues, and provide training, as I mentioned before, about ethics. And I think this is really important. People with lived experiences, this kind of emphasis on them telling their story, but actually they shouldn't have to ever tell their story if they don't want to. They should be treated as experts who are drawing on their experience to help inform the research inquiry. And bringing trauma awareness to the work is really important. And again, I mentioned before about recognising this could be triggering for people. And finally, using the arts as a way of helping people to engage, to share their views, learn new skills and have fun. And I'm now going to hand it back over to Celeste, and thank you.
Thank you, Briege. So the report that Briege has worked on and kind of referred to throughout, all that is available on our website. If you don't already have it, it should have been sent out as part of the joining instructions. But if you don't have it, you can also just get in touch and we'll send you the link. So now, finally, it is time for our Q&A session. So I'd like to invite the rest of the panel. Hello, welcome everyone. So I know we've met some of you already, but just as a little recap, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves and say a little bit about your involvement in Life as We Know It and our participatory evaluation project. So I thought maybe I would start. I know, Ian, we've seen you on film earlier, but maybe we can start with you.
Thanks, I'm Ian Shawn, and I helped with the design of this process and working creatively with the peer researchers.
And how about over to you next, Shawn?
Yeah, so I'm Shawn. I'm from Briege Education as well, and I was part of the creative team to support peer researchers in creating the creative assets that came out of the report, and channeling some of the thoughts and ideas that they were having throughout the process.
So then to round out kind of the Life as We Know It team, we've already met and heard from Briege, and then we've got the star of the show actually here live and in person. Liam, do you want to say a hello?
Hello, my name is Lynn and I am a peer researcher, and thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for being here, Liam. It's a real pleasure. So the other two people that are joining us today are, we've got Katie here from Research Scotland.
Hi, I'm Katie. I worked alongside Nadia, and I had the absolute pleasure of working with Liam and some of the other peer researchers as we evaluated the Champions Board approach for the Life Changes Trust.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you for being here today. And then finally, we've got my colleague, Mari, here, who's representing the funders' perspective on our panel today.
Hi everyone, yeah, I'm Mari Reid. I work alongside Celeste. I was involved in this project right at the very start, so the actual procurement process of it, and I'm involved in the wider evaluation programme at the Trust.
Thanks, Mari. Thanks for being here, everyone. So we're going to actually start with a question for you, Mari. We were wondering, what are some things that funders need to take into account if they want to work in this way, and if they want to enable others to do participatory research and evaluation?
Sure, yeah, it's a good question. I think it overlaps with so many things around co-production and participation and engagement, actually. So I think for me, funders hold a lot of power. We know that, and when we're working really hard to balance that power, and I think you can see things changing around who's in the room when important things are happening about sort of programme design, assessments around funding applications, decision making about who actually gets money, speaking at events, things like that. But I think that funders still hold quite a lot of power when it comes to learning and evaluation. Not only the evaluations that they commission, but the support that they then give to projects to commission their own evaluations or do their own self-evaluation. So I think what I'd like to encourage people and funders to think about is those sort of principles of co-production and participation, thinking about flexibility resourcing, a lot of the stuff that Briege has already picked up on, patience, trust. Where is the power actually sitting when we are doing this procurement exercise, for example, when we're thinking about analysis and design? And the main reason I'm saying all this is because we know from this project that it just makes things better. You get more creative ideas, better questions are asked, contextual understanding's better when you're doing analysis. So, and I think for funders, when you work in this way, the main thing is that the outputs will resonate more with the people that really matter.
Yeah, I think that's dead on. Thank you. Thank you, Mari. And there's kind of a related question that sort of popped up. So I might just kind of sneak this one in as well. So Kirsty is asking kind of about what is, you mentioned resource, right? And so Kirsty's asked basically, she says, I know you can't give exact numbers, but what kind of level of extra time or resource are we talking about here? And this is kind of open to kind of media ed and Katie as well. Like what do we need in terms of resource and time? What do we need to be considering to do this really well?
I mean, I'm happy to let other people come in terms of the actual time element of it. The only thing I would just come in quickly with at the start is applying that flexibility to the resource. So if you're working with researchers, it's just about saying, you've got this budget. The pandemic's a great example. It was all there for travel, but actually there's different ways to use that budget. There's different ways to facilitate engagement and participation. So just to make that wee point about flexibility when it comes to resource.
And on that, we chose to use part of the travel budget for equipment and enabling devices for our peer researchers. So it makes sense, and it's really, if it's a person-centered approach, you're saying, what do we need here? How can we adjust? In terms of time, I think it's very difficult to overestimate the amount of time that you might need, because you can always use that time resource in terms of developing your project and developing the value of it. And I'm very aware of there's a larger value in terms of professional development, personal development, and all those other outcomes that are coming out of this as well. So in terms of it not being seen within a narrow frame of what is your research about, but also the other benefits too.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Ian and Mari, about the flexibility there. When we put in our proposal, we had imagined in the pre-pandemic days that we would work with about 10 peer evaluators for 2 days of their time each. And we had kind of matched that up and imagined that the researchers from Research Scotland would put in about 2 days for each of those researchers. So things like training, supporting people, going along with them. And we'd imagined actually going out and doing visits and people coming with us on case study visits and so on. So we had to be completely flexible and use our budget and time in a completely different way. I mean, there were a few fundamentals, like making sure that we are putting time in for training and for paying people at the living wage, and for making sure that people have all of the equipment and resources that they need to be able to take part, whether that's a desk to sit at or a device or Wi-Fi connectivity. People needed all of those kind of discussions and support. But probably the main thing was, on top of those fundamentals, just being flexible about what people wanted to do and what they needed to be able to do that.
I think on top of that, like even without a global pandemic, like especially working with young people, lives are in transition. Just that's what it's like being a young person. Your life is changing so fast. So like things that people can commit to and be involved in might not always be that case throughout the project, especially a long project. So having that in mind as well, that peer researchers, like their lives can be changing within the period of a project, and thinking about how you can be flexible to support them to be involved still when things change.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Briege.
I was just going to chip in there and just say, I think it's also about having like a stage process. So we were, just like Katie was saying, and I think Research Scotland Lines Between both did this, and I thought it was a really good way of doing it, is, easing in. So we did the training, we not doing everything at once. So I think time, the lead-in time for peer researchers is really important. It's like the start off was just observing an interview, then it was doing a bit of an interview, then it was, you know, designing some questions. So I think when you're thinking about the time, it's also that front end is really important, I suppose I would say. The training is really important. So even if you're only having a peer research involved 2 hours every month thereafter, don't skimp on the beginning.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that it's been really clear that that's really paid off in this project and Katie, in your work with the champions boards.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. I agree. Putting that time in early on and also being flexible. I mean, Liam told us what he was interested in and the others said what they were interested in. So we designed a plan that kind of fitted. Some people did a lot of work for our interim report within quite a short time scale, and others spread it out over much longer time scales as well. So just as and when people were available, what time they had and what they were interested in. So you're absolutely right, Briege.
Oh, that's brilliant. So I'm aware of, gosh, we could talk about this all day, and I'll come back to that at the end of the panel session, don't worry. But I'm aware of time, and so I do want to we have lots of questions for you, Liam. So I thought that we'd start with the first one. I know. You are the star of the show. So Liam, for the first question is, what advice would you give to a young person who is considering joining up as a peer researcher?
The advice I'd give is that not many people in the past have been given opportunities like this to really talk about the feelings about the care system, you know what I mean? Not many of them have had that opportunity. For me, for example, this is the first time I've heard of anything like this happening, not I mean, in my lifetime. I'd also say that if you are passionate about wanting to make a change, you know what I mean, then I think you have to be as committed as you can be. Obviously, there's things that might get in the way of things, and that's completely understandable. But be as committed as you can be. Like, I believe you've been given this golden ticket, you know what I mean? You've been chosen, you know what I mean, as a peer researcher. So this is your chance you've got a white canvas, you go out there and you put down what you want to put down, and don't be afraid to hold back. If you're not there, don't be afraid to not let it go and feel like you have to hold back, because no changes are going to be made if you hold back. If you know what I mean. Obviously, I'm not talking about personal life. I'm talking about what you see. And I'd say as well, like as I said in chat of Ian, that I didn't take this on for me to look for praise or for me to go out there and tell my story. I took this on for people in the past, because I've heard about people saying, oh, the care system failed them, or it's made their life even worse, if you know what I mean. Which is quite sad to hear, because people who have gone into care, they've been into care for, they've came from a bit of a bad life, and I take this on for, I'd say I took it on for the people who feel like the system have let them down, and if I can make any sort of change, any positive change, then it just makes me really quite proud. You know what I mean? Because like that's what I want. Like it's just that's what I want.
Well, there's no doubt, I think, in anyone's mind that with you working on this, it's just one step closer to making that positive change. We really appreciate it. So we've got a follow-up question for you, Liam, which I think you touched on a little bit you may have touched on a little bit in the chat, but someone has asked, what was the most enjoyable part of this for you? What did you kind of get the most out of?
Well, for me, it was quite fascinating, because for me, it's actually all about how the project itself ran. For example, I said when I went through Edinburgh for the interview, I'd be lying to you if I said I wasn't expecting a table with lots of chairs, a wee glass of water in the middle, and being offered a bit of fruit or something like it. But really, it actually felt a lot more youthful. You know what I mean? It felt like it felt like a youth club setting, which I think me and the fellow peer researchers actually appreciate, because we spoke about how in the past, when you go to when we were children, we went to children panel meetings and sat at a table, all the people around it. It kind of feels a wee bit old-fashioned, if you know what I mean. It's like, you know what I mean? It's a wee bit old-fashioned. You have to move with the times. And for me personally, I quite like the aspect of it being more open. There wasn't any tables and sat and sit down and introduce yourself. You know what I mean? It felt quite free. So, and also for the arts itself, in the past, I think whenever you've done courses, you've had to follow how people tell you to do stuff. Like people say, I want you to write down, or I want you to do this. With this project, it wasn't I want you to, it's do you do it the way you want to do it. Me, myself, I done metaphors and poetry and photographs, and to people that might be quite dull, if you know what I mean, like metaphors, really, you know what I mean? But for me, that's what I enjoyed, if you know what I mean. And I think the powerful thing about metaphors is it can help people understand things better, because like if something's complicated, people are going to lose interest. You know what I mean? Where if you change it to the way you think someone might enjoy hearing it, then people are going to go, all right. For example, with the movie, I spoke about how I looked at it as a movie, the live film and the viewers, people might look at it and go, you know what, that's a good point actually. And it's the same with like one of our peer researchers doing the surviving videos. In the past, don't know if he would have had confidence to actually make video and do it, but having heard him and seen the individual, I was like, I was blown away. And I don't say things just to make people happy. I genuinely was like I was proud of him.
If I may, I just wanted to say that I think that the setting up of the values and the ethos of the way that the research was conducted, and that idea of we're all co-inquiring, and that there's the levels of support and the thoroughness of the ethical stance and things, and Briege really brought a lot of that on board in terms of making sure everything was just right. And I think that what then happens is we all then breathe easier and we all grow into that space. And I think that was what was going on there, Liam. I really appreciated that. And I wrote down a few key words, and one of them is, it's got to be a rewarding experience. What are the rewards here? Why are people doing this? And of course, there's money reward, but there's so much more. And so that being able to work in a creative, co-production, cooperative, collegiate way was, and looking at making sure the power differentials are not too bad within what you're doing, and there always will exist. But what I've seen from this is that equalization out of power, and then the idea of using your arts practice as an individual to be the starting point for relating. So it's the peer researchers setting the agenda, and people saying, all right, I now understand from my professional world and there's a meeting place there on a more equal basis. And that's been a very important part of this for me. Sorry, I know there's tons more questions, Liam. I'm shutting up now.
No, it's oh gosh, it's just so brilliant to hear all of your insights. And I'm devastated that we're running out of time, but I am going to sneak one more question in. And this is just kind of to everybody, because this is something that Gordon put in. And he said that I work with a group of young people who are becoming more involved in research and evaluation of the hearing system. And I would love to hear from the panel their thoughts on ensuring approaches are safe, fun, and at the same time, develop skills and future opportunities. So just kind of, if you had kind of one, I guess, just kind of one key point there to talk about how you can actually ensure that this is safe, but it's also fun, and they're also getting something out of it. What would your sort of top thing be, I guess?
I would say start from where people are. Establish very quickly that there are boundaries and that there's respect, and that this whole idea of yes, you can say no. And so that's part of the, and build on positive identity.
I think also maybe building that trust and handing over as much control as you feel that you safely can, and handing over in designing what you want to create, handing that over to the people involved.
I would say keep checking into people all throughout the process, just in case you just don't know if something's been triggering, and offer support that's outside of your organisation that they can go to even anonymously. That's what media education's done for all the peer researchers. They can tap into any counsellor at any point anonymously, which I think is really valuable.
I'd say let the people know that this is about them. It's not about us. It's about you guys. You guys are who we are listening to. You know what I mean? So let them know that it's not going to be scheduled. It's not going to be strict. It's going to be about you, and I think that will fill people with more confidence.
That's so interesting, Liam. I was just going to say, follow the interests of the participants. We found that people were really interested in creative and arty approaches, and we introduced some live illustration to the process, and it really helped to bring the outputs of the research to life. So absolutely follow the interests of the people who are involved.
I mean, from my perspective, as a funder, it's just, if you're commissioning something like this, work with these people because they have these principles. So everything that everyone's just said, prioritise that, get the right mix of people in that space together, and trust them, you know, and be flexible with them. And yeah, this is the output.
And it is an amazing output, isn't it? I mean, and I think we've had some comments in the chat box. It's just incredible hearing all of your insights and all of your expertise in this. So thank you so much for joining us and answering our questions. We just so appreciate you all taking the time to join us this morning. So panel members, I'm gonna let you go now so you can go relax. We're at the end of the webinar. We're actually a little bit over time, so my apologies for that, but I think it was worth it to hear those few extra minutes from them. We know that there is a lot more to talk about, and so that's why we're hosting a deeper dive conversation tomorrow at noon. So this is going to be a more informal Zoom call in which you can join in and have a bit more of a chat around kind of the practicalities and get into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty about doing participatory evaluation. So if you're interested in joining, just drop me an email and I will send you joining instructions. So my email is going to be popped in the chat there if you need it, so you can reach me on that. So now all that's left to say is that it has been an absolute pleasure to chair this event. I hope everyone else has enjoyed it as much as I have, and that everyone will take away a little bit of learning from today. So I want to say thank you, a huge thank you to our speakers and our panelists who gave their time to make this event possible. We'll email everyone with the link to the recording of this webinar in a few days. You'll also see it on our social media channels. And finally, thank you